Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today, it's hip to be square, or, well, rectangular. This is the Patek Philippe Gondolo 5124J, 33.5 millimeters wide by 43 millimeters lug to lug. This is a watch rendered in 18-karat yellow gold, and it represents Patek Philippe's living legends of the Art Deco, the Gondolo series. Now, since 1993, Gondolo, inspired by Patek Philippe's early 20th century special commissions to its Brazilian importer, have represented something of a parallel thread of Patek Philippe historical artistic design, running in parallel, of course, with the Calatravas. But whereas the Calatravas emerged out of the Art Deco era, integrating the round case and the blended lug, the Gondolos feature the rectilinear lines, the strong, bold geometries, the semi-machine ethic that really characterized Art Deco. Think of New York City skyscrapers. That's the look that's embodied in the Gondolo versus the soft, bosomy, rounded forms of the Calatrava. And on this Gondolo, reference 5124J, Patek Philippe, as of the late 2000s when this one debuted, was referencing its 1990s Gondolo 5024. That's a much smaller watch, so I want to emphasize that the 5124 is not that. While that watch was 30 by 38 millimeters, this one, 33.5 by 43 millimeters, wears with a lot more presence on the wrist. And you can see that my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, is a perfect fit for the size of this watch. Now, rectangular watches, or non-round watches in general, whether they're rectangular or tonneau or reverso, they will wear larger than their nominal size. So when you say, well, it's 33.5 millimeters wide, what does it feel like on the wrist? I'll say on the wrist, it does feel like approximately a 43 millimeter watch, but just a 43 millimeter watch, not something that wears larger than its 43, not something like a 42 millimeter offshore. Very flat. The watch is only 10 millimeters thick, and you'll also notice that it has a bit of a camber to it. That means that from side to side, it sort of slopes up and over, rounded to conform to the curvature of my wrist. Now, if your wrist is below 6 inches, say sub 15 centimeters in metric speak, the bottom line is that this watch is probably a good match for you because it does have a lot of ability to meet the shape of your wrist halfway. The straps will pull down straight, the case is curved, and you can see that even the sapphire crystal itself is cambered, so the look is not just ergonomically correct, but aesthetically it's very integrated. Now, as you can see from the side, it sits very low on the wrist. The actual height on the wrist, because it does tuck in a little bit and cinch down on the skin, the actual height on the wrist is probably below 9 millimeters, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a stepped side to the case flanks, so with that classic look from the 5024, the 5124 is a perfect match for formal attire and tight sleeves. Now you can see the dial itself. While it may appear silvered on the iPhone, I want to emphasize that Patek Philippe calls this opaline white, and in person it does read as more white than silver. It's also a bit of a seamless look in as much that as there isn't really any grain, guilloche, or texture to this dial. It celebrates those contrasting applied yellow gold elements, the hands, hours, minutes, and small seconds, the polished chapter ring of the small second subdial at 6 o'clock, the applied dart indices at each of the hour stations, as well as the applied and polished yellow gold 12 at the station of 12, just above the Patek Philippe marquee. Now, in true Art Deco fashion, there is a modified sector or railroad chapter ring running around the outer circumference, and I feel that the purpose of this is to unify the case and the dial. Now, you can see the dial with those striking dart indices at each hour station really has a pointed, almost explosive directionality to it. It's almost like it's sucking you in towards the hand at center, and what that chapter ring does visually is it unifies the lines of the case, and being slightly canted at any point with all of the actual interlinking lines of the sector subdial, or rather sector chapter ring pointing inwards, it draws the bezel in towards those indices, which then just accelerate and direct your gaze to the time at center. So the chapter ring, the bezel, and the indices all work in contrast to unify and center your eyes upon this watch face. Very beautiful, also very clever. A lot of thought goes into rendering the simplicity of this timepiece. But even more thought goes into rendering the movement. Now this is the in-house Patek Philippe caliber 25-21 RECPS, which is basically a way of saying it is Patek Philippe's manual wind small second, rectangular shaped movement. Shaped movements are a specialty of the true manufacturers in watchmaking, those companies that can design a case and then build a movement to fill it out completely. Now you can see that this watch, being manual wind, keeps no secrets, and I love that. 18 jewels, 142 parts, and you can see almost all of them. With an automatic winding watch, you often lose half of the vista, half of the pleasure of owning the timepiece, because the rotor, even when skeletonized, covers a lot of the movement. That is not the case here. Now this example, having been purchased recently, features the new school Patek Philippe seal. While old-time romantics like me may miss the Poinçon de Genève, the Geneva hallmark, the bottom line is that the standard of finish is as high as ever, if not higher, because Patek Philippe continues to push forward, not just in aesthetics, in which the company is clearly a leader, but in technology. Now, while the 4 Hz escapement and 44-hour power reserve of this watch will be familiar to those who know Patek's basic manual wind movements, the free-sprung Gyromax escapement does feature the Spiromax silicon hairspring, so not only is it exceptionally durable and high-tech, but it's also highly amagnetic. So if you are a physician working around MRIs, if you are a technologist working around high-powered computers or wiring looms, or if you just have a really killer stereo system in your house with subwoofers, this watch is good to go, both traditional in look and progressive in its technology. And the bottom line is, Patek Philippe's look is as traditional as it comes. Linear coaches de Genève, beautiful mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge. This watch is beautifully executed, and all the screw and jewel countersinks equally well finished. Although the polished segments are small, under the loop you can see that the execution is flawless. No file lines are unintentionally left. There are no burrs remaining. Everything is a mirror sheen, and this is on the micro level. I mean 20 power loop type stuff. Patek does not chemically or heat blue its screws. Rather, it chamfers their circumference, it slots them beautifully so that even the interior slots are chamfered, and then it polishes the heads flat to a poly noir standard, or black polish. So from many angles the screws read as black because optically they're so smooth that they reflect light in linear fashion in only one direction, which is why you can see the screws sort of transforming as I move this watch through the light, alternately reading as reflective and dark, depending on the angle. And that's key to Patek's finishing tradition. Now the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel, as well as the click, are finished with a unique non-directional brushing. So while they have a grain, it's not exactly a circular or radial grain. It's not soleil. It's very unique looking, but it's beautifully done, and it's very memorable. There's a tight perlage pattern on the base plate, and you can see a lot of it because Patek keeps the channels between the balance cock, the bridges, very open. So this is a very visible movement in many senses, on many levels, in as much as it's manual wind, not automatic, but also in its architecture in terms of the location of the bridges about the main plate. Now the watch does feature the quick release spring bars that make changing the strap quite easy, so easy in fact that you can do it at home with your fingernail. I like that because the idea of marring a Patek made 18 karat gold case with jeweler's tools, even in the hands of a professional, honestly, it gives me the chills. I'd rather just do it quickly with a spring bar that I can pull with my finger and replace at my leisure. So if you do want to change the look of the watch to dress it up or down, you're good to go in that respect too. With classical looks but contemporary proportions and engineering, this Patek Philippe Gondolo reference 5124J is an outstanding example of Patek's other thread of living history. If you're not into the Calatrava look, but you like Patek Philippe, and you think Art Deco is just a bit more, I don't know, intriguing when it's rectilinear with strong, bold geometries, this may be your watch. If the Chrysler Building is your type of art in practice, the Patek Philippe Gondolo is your type of watch. See it on our website, Watch You Want.